Now it's time for a business spotlight. This is the Adelaide Project.
Welcome to Podcast City Radio, where we engage in thought-provoking conversations with insightful guests. Today we are joined by the esteemed Karen Keevy, who will be shedding light on a persistent concern affecting countless of Australians. Our discussion will revolve around a recent survey conducted by the Australian Institute of Criminology, revealing shocking statistics about child sexual exploitation and abuse solicited on dating apps. Karen, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Ron. It's lovely to see you.
Look, I can't believe that this is actually happening, that we need to talk about this, but here we are again with another subject. And this time it's all about dating apps. Look, can you give us a little bit background before we start getting right into it?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember last time that we saw each other, we were talking about the Australian child maltreatment research that came out last year and that identified different forms of abuse that people had experienced in their childhood. And those research findings were quite alarming.
Yep.
However, here we have, less than 6 months later, we have another huge survey, 10,000 people that were involved in this survey, people who are on dating apps and are being targeted by child predators for child sexual abuse. It shocked me when I saw this as to the prevalence, Ron. 1 in 8.
1 in 8.
One in 8 people.
Unbelievable. 1 in 8 Australians on dating apps have reportedly encountered requests related to child sexual exploitation and abuse.
Oh, it's horrific. And whilst we consider people that go on dating apps, by and large, can be a little bit vulnerable. They're looking for love, let's face it. These people, and I'm, child predators, we're specifically talking about people who target adults for images of their children.
Yep.
They're experts at what they do. They're highly manipulative, highly coercive. They control the narrative very, very quickly. They know how to target vulnerable people.
Yeah.
They do this all the time. And I'm putting them in one group, I know, which I shouldn't generalise, because there are others who target individuals on dating apps who may not necessarily have a network that they operate in, but by and large they do. They share these images, they sell them off.
Yeah.
And what we do know about people who target children is that they usually operate in groups because it legitimises what they do. So what I mean by that is, whilst if you are working in isolation, you might start to get feelings of guilt and shame around what you're doing.
Yeah.
However, if you're operating in a group where people are doing the same thing, it basically gives you the okay for what you're doing.
Something I don't understand is, if a criminal is doing a criminal act, wouldn't they want to keep this to themselves so therefore they don't get caught? I mean, exposing yourself to other people gives you the opportunity of being caught. So what you're saying to me is that they are basically boasting or bragging about what they're doing to make themselves feel good, to make them feel that this is legitimate.
Yes. When I saw the results of this survey, I was shocked at the confidence of child predators.
Yeah.
And the brazenness, I guess, of how confident that they feel that they can do this and get away with it. And let's face it, and, the research findings showed this. This is a successful strategy for child predators. They wouldn't be doing this if they weren't getting results.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be spending the time on doing this if they weren't getting what they wanted. And that, to me, is hugely alarming. And as we know, with any form of child sexual abuse, it's not just the child that is being groomed and abused, but also the parents of that child as well. So there's a period of grooming with the parents, and then that quickly moves on to the child.
Look, what are the key findings from this survey, and what do they tell us about the extent of the issue? So what did they actually find is happening?
Okay, well, we went through the 1 in 8 are being targeted, which is a huge number of people, especially when you consider that this was a really, really big sample of 10,000 people, and it was across a couple of different dating apps. So it was Tinder and a couple of others.
So just before we go on, when they did this survey, the response they were getting back, were they getting it back from the victims or the people actually doing it as well?
No, the results were coming from people who had signed up with Tinder and other dating apps.
Yep.
And they were asked a series of questions, And it was coming directly from those people who are members of these dating apps.
Right.
So that's where the research comes from. This is recent research. So it's 2021. So we're 2024 now. This would have been around COVID times.
Yes.
So a lot of people were spending time online.
Mm.
We need to consider that, certainly. However, this is a trend. It's an ongoing trend.
Yeah.
And we've known that for quite some time, that single mums are a target group for child predators. We know that. Men and women are being targeted. So whilst it's, when you see those headlines, you automatically think of men targeting single mums.
Yeah.
What the research findings revealed was that single dads and men, grandfathers, for example, are being targeted equally as women and as well as women. So women are targeting men.
Really?
Yeah. People posing as women are targeting men. And we sort of knew that. But women are child predators along with men. And I think when we hear that description of a child predator, we tend to have images in our head of a certain person that does this. And I think one of the most useful things that we can do is whatever image we have in our mind about who does this, get rid of it. Because, as we know, child predators come from all backgrounds, all age groups, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all cultures and so forth. So we're talking about a huge spectrum of people who do this. It's highly addictive. It's an addiction. And it is a mental illness, and it needs to be treated as such.
Someone said to me once that people that collect, they're actually called collectors of child abuse material. It's like a game. It's like Pokemon, getting how many cards can you get? Some of these people have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of images and videos, and they just keep collecting to their, I don't know what you would call it, to their collection. But, it is a mental illness, as you say, but there are people out there that just simply will do anything to get these images. So, for example, you're saying the single mothers, and now single fathers are being targeted. The grandparents are being targeted. So now the dirty old man, stranger from the park is not who we need to be worried about anymore. We really need to start to be looking at the subconscious who don't realise they're being targeted.
That's a really good point that you've brought up, because so much of child protection education in the past, not now so much, but in the past has certainly perpetuated that concept of if it's being strangers, dirty old men that abuse children. That's so wrong. And I think, we know better now. Sexual abuse happens within families, between siblings, parents of children.
It's someone they know a lot of the time, isn't it?
Absolutely, because that grooming has occurred. So basically what a child predator is trying to do is manipulate the victim into giving over things that they wouldn't ordinarily without that period of grooming. So, for example, when we talk about the escalation of requests by a child predator, it might start as simply as, have you got an image of your child? As someone who is a possible partner for you, I'd love to see your kids. Have you got some pictures?
Yeah.
And of course, this person sounds really charismatic. They're, they're very kind to me. They're very interested in me. They're paying me attention. Yeah, I'll send you some photos across. And then, as we found from the survey results, is that this soon escalates. So it might start out as, have you got a picture of your child? And then it might be, oh, have you got a picture of your child in the bath? And then, as soon as you play into their game, it escalates. So then it will be, have you got a naked image? Have you got video footage? Would you be prepared to do some sexual acts with your child and we can film it? It gets out of hand so quickly. And I guess as we were talking before and I'm thinking about single mums, for example, and there are other vulnerable demographics that we'll talk about, but if you're a single mum and you're doing it tough financially and you are vulnerable and, maybe you haven't got any food, maybe you haven't got any petrol, and you're on a dating app looking for a partner because, you want that support. You're looking for your other half or whatever your mindset is in terms of being on a dating app.
Yep.
If someone is love bombing you, telling you all the things that you want to hear, if they, paying you all this attention and positioning you as the best thing that they've, since sliced bread, you are the best thing, you're the best woman I've ever met, you're amazing and, you're a fabulous mother, and they're feeding into the vulnerabilities of that person constantly by what they're saying. And then, perhaps it might be, have you got as we talked about before, have you got a photo of your kids? I'd love to see your kids. I love children.
Yeah.
I look after and I babysit kids, of my family and so forth. So again, they're allaying people's fears. I'm a responsible person. Look at me. I do all these wonderful things. I'm really good with kids. So it might then just be, have you got a photo of you and your child in the bath? Or something simple, but then the money will come into it. And it's a tough call. It's a really, really tough call. If you've got no food, if you've got no petrol in the car, if you, haven't got money for cigarettes or whatever it may be, and this person's offering you $100 cash, I'll put it straight into your bank account. You might sort of justify it to yourself and think, oh, it's not doing any harm. It's just a picture of, my child in the bath. It's harmless. I see other images around, if you have kids in baths and their back is uncovered or whatever. But that's how it starts, Ron. That's how they operate. This is grooming. They start with one request and soon it just gets out of control. It escalates. And before you know it, you are stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Oh, most definitely. And I can understand that the cost of living and all, people are looking for alternative ways and they're being scammed many different ways.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the thing that gets me most of all about this, and maybe I'm coming from a different perspective than being vulnerable in the sense of having children and, needing to feed them or needing to clothe them or putting petrol in the car. But if I'm talking to someone on a dating app, I wouldn't really expect maybe the first 10 conversations of anything to do with my children. It'd be more of getting to know each other. So when that red flag comes up and it's the second conversation and they start asking about children, what do you do? What do your children do? And stuff like that. What should we be doing? Like, should we just delete this person?
Hang on, let's back it up because there's quite a lot in what you just said. First of all, it may not be 10 conversations and they start to get into this because they're experts at what they do. So quite often it could be the first conversation.
That's what I'm saying. For me, it would be 10 conversations before I would say, oh, so you have children. It wouldn't be something that I'd be thinking about straight away.
Clearly you've got boundaries, you've got personal boundaries, and you know that in order to keep yourself safe and your children safe, that it's little by little. I only disclose a little bit at a time and trust needs to be earned.
Exactly.
I don't, in the first conversation, just let loose with my whole life story, all my vulnerabilities. No. Because as soon as we do that, they play straight into it.
Exactly.
So, for example, that might sound like, oh, you sound so kind. My ex wasn't like that. There was a restraining order and, as soon as you say things like that, you are giving them information about yourself that they can manipulate.
Yeah.
I would never, ever be unkind to you. Kindness is one of the most important things. And honesty. So they're just going to feed into that. You've got to remember on these guys, I shouldn't say guys because women are doing it as well.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. But they're experts at what they do. And it's so difficult to get your head around that unless you've experienced narcissistic abuse yourself in the past. It is so foreign to you that people could be so manipulative or people could tell lies or people could be deceptive. But believe me, don't believe me, believe the survey findings because they're out there and they're targeting vulnerable groups and you've identified some of those in this list here.
Yeah,
First Nations people, young Australians, those with long-term illnesses or disabilities, those groups are being targeted more often than others because they're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's vulnerability that predators zoom in on. It's like a magnet. They know how to do it. They know how to control and manipulate. And at the end of the day, it's about power.
Yeah. Yeah.
About taking power away from those that they perceive are less powerful.
And you were saying when we were talking before we started that a lot of times this will lead to blackmail. This will lead to, that it could be something as, that you're breaking the law and if I go down, you go down too sort of thing. So then they're in a position where if they don't give the person what they want, then in a position of maybe thinking that they're going to go to jail or they're going to have a criminal record for doing something that they thought at the start, as you said, was innocent. And it's just turned so dark.
And so quickly.
Yeah.
And you've hit the nail right on the head. This is darkness. Let's make no mistake. This is dark and no one wants to get involved in that kind of darkness. Nobody. Another thing that you raised before, Ron, was red flags.
Yeah.
And how I would counter that is that if you are vulnerable and you want something badly enough, and that might be a partner, you want a romantic partner, sometimes your vision of what you want is very streamlined and very tunnel vision.
Yes.
Or another way of saying it is you've got your rose-coloured glasses on.
Yeah.
And so what you do is you filter out those red flags because that gives you information that you don't really want to hear.
Yeah.
Or see.
Yeah.
But again, and I don't want this to sound like I'm victim blaming because I'm not. What I'm all about is empowering people and just, knowledge is power.
Yes.
So having the knowledge and being aware of what's happening is hugely important, as is profiling, getting the information out into the community, how these individuals work.
Yeah. And
well.
I think that's the thing. If people understand how this works, if people understand what these predators are doing, you're more than likely to be aware of it. And now that's the thing. We're not supposed to talk about this sort of stuff. It's taboo. If we look at mainstream media, they won't discuss this. For example, and I'm sorry to say this, but, if you're a single parent, you have to be alert. You have to realize that this could happen and you've got to put precautions in place. So they're saying, and I've always said, a woman can do whatever she wants in life, but you've got to have precautions. And same with men. Men can do anything they want in life, but they've got to act a certain way and behave a certain way. And the thing is that, if you do have children, you've got to realize that if you're going to be going on dating apps, that this could happen. So you have to make sure that whether we put a checklist out, whether, and the government's talking about this with apps at the moment of having verification of some description, which only can go so far. We need to have something there where we can say, when this comes up, okay, I've got to be cautious here.
I guess, this is multifaceted. There's a lot of different things that we can put in place around this to help alleviate these stats. But at the end of the day, if you are vulnerable, you are open to being targeted.
Exactly.
Whether that's on a dating app, whether that's at the pub on a Saturday night at a nightclub. So it's about, for me, it's about knowing what your vulnerabilities are. And a lot of those vulnerabilities, dare I say this, come from childhood.
Yes.
So if, for example, you experienced family and domestic violence when you were growing up, if you experienced child sexual abuse when you were growing up, you are going to have certain vulnerabilities.
Yes.
And unless you treat the cause, and they are two big causes right there, you are going to be vulnerable to this kind of behaviour from predators. And again, I don't want this to sound like I'm blaming victims. It's your fault that you're being targeted. Please don't think that that's where I'm coming from. Where I am coming from is that know your vulnerabilities and work on them.
Yes.
Get some help, get some professional help, get some counselling so you can reframe your past so that your future will be different.
Yes, most definitely.
And that's within our own responsibility, our own personal responsibility. Sure, when we were kids, things happened, it was out of our control. But in terms of our life, that's our responsibility and moving forward. So if you've had that kind of trauma happen to you, and it's so common, we saw that with the child maltreatment research from last year. it's very, very common, whether you admit that to yourself or not. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people suppress that kind of abuse.
Yes.
But it will filter out in various ways. And quite often it gets reenacted. So,
Yeah.
for example, you know, if you were someone who experienced family and domestic violence,
Yes.
you might be someone who is a perpetrator into their adult years. So you might be the person that does the physical violence against people
Yeah.
because you're so angry.
Mhm.
You know, you're so angry about what happened to you as a kid. You know, you had no control over what was happening. So you, as an adult, decide, okay, I'm going to have the control this time
Mm.
and I'm going to get my power back this way.
Yeah.
But it's a false sense of power and it's a horrible way to live.
Oh, most definitely. And the thing is, we've got to have these hard conversations. Unfortunately, the way it is today, everything is just rosy. We've got to be, you know, we can't say certain things, we can't do certain things, and we can't help certain people because we're taking their power away, as they say. But sometimes we need to have these conversations and really shake people up to realize that this is what needs to be done to make your life better.
Thank heavens that you've got Podcast City and I can we can talk about this together because it is so true. You know, nothing gets healed in the dark. So anything that's suppressed, anything that's too difficult to talk about are the very reasons why we should be.
Yeah.
And highlighting these issues, but more importantly too, how to lead people out of these situations. Because yes, okay, here's some research that's come out, you know, 1 in 8 people are being targeted. Well, rather than sit there and think, oh my goodness, you know, sit in fear around that, let's try and empower ourselves so this doesn't happen to us.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's try and change that narrative for our own personal history.
Yes, I agree.
So for example, if I'm looking for a partner, take your time. You know, don't rush into anything. So many people do rush into relationships because it's going to be a quick fix to something that they're trying to perhaps escape from, you know, whether that be loneliness, whether that might be, you know, I need to feed off someone telling me how gorgeous I am because it's going to make me feel better. And that inner part of me that thinks that I'm really ugly and unwanted and unloved, that's going to get fed up. You know, I'm going to fill myself up with their compliments. But as soon as we start reaching outside of ourselves to feel good about ourselves, that's when we're vulnerable.
We're letting our guard down. We're letting people take advantage of that. Karen, if we look on TV at the moment, there's these ads out there that talk about child sexual abuse, and not just sexual abuse, but also physical abuse, emotional abuse. And they're done in a way where they have an adult on a child and then it turns into a cartoon style situation and then comes back to the actual adult. How important is it for the government to put these sort of adverts out? And also, should we be putting adverts out like these dating apps in a similar fashion?
That's a really good point that you've raised, because that Australian child maltreatment study that was conducted in the research findings came out last year. They found that adults perpetrating sexual abuse against children, that cohort of people, that group of people, is actually decreasing.
Okay.
But the fastest growing group of child predators are adolescents. That is hugely concerning.
Yeah.
Hugely concerning, because you juxtapose that against the fact that we don't have a lot of education in schools, and when it is done, it's very haphazard. It's not done comprehensively. That's hugely alarming. So this is, you know, adolescents, teenagers perpetrating sexual abuse against young children. So whether that be a sibling, you know, it might be a young brother or a young sister. And let's face it, you know, if you're a parent and you walk in on something like that, there's a number of different responses to that situation that can happen. Yeah. But ideally, you know, it's wrong. It is child abuse.
I think sometimes what I've read and seen is that it's an in-family thing and it's not to be discussed outside the family. It's just, don't do this again sort of thing. It's wrong. Yeah. But just leaving it at that is just not going to cut it.
No, it doesn't cut it. And again, you know, this behaviour is highly addictive. Often children reenact what they've experienced. So that's another red flag. Okay, this child is reenacting abuse. Well, why is that child doing that?
Yeah, that's something let's just explore that just for a second. no child can come up on this on their own. They've got to be either shown or been in a situation of it. Because, I mean, yes, children do, play doctors or something like that with each other in a fun, innocent way with themselves, but none of them would be doing some of the I suppose you could say, hardcore things that have been reported unless they've actually been shown these things.
Mm. And again, we've got the internet to thank for that.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not putting the internet down because there's been a lot of benefits that have come from kids being online. But one of the huge downsides is the amount of child sexual abuse material, pornography that they can view online free.
Well, that's something I'll never understand, why people put free stuff out like that. It's so easy to get. I mean, you can put innocent things in, and we do this with our radio show. We'll be researching something for an upcoming topic for a podcast or for a radio show, and we'll put something as innocent in as what type of clothings are trending for girls. And we won't get, tracksuits or fairy wings or something. It will be something pornographic coming up. And it's something as innocent as that. We haven't put any of those keywords in to look for that, but they come up.
Kids are being, as you and I know, and we've talked about it before, children are being sexualized younger and younger and younger. And that's a societal thing.
Yeah.
And certainly, some parents do it as well, sexualize their children. And that's another podcast, I think.
Yeah.
But society is doing this because there's money to be made in it. At the end of the day, it's about money and it's about power.
Yeah.
And I would say at the end of the day, this is about our precious children who don't have the voice to speak up for themselves, who aren't being shown right from wrong.
Yes.
They're being shown a lot of wrong.
Yeah.
And if you are shown a lot of wrong, that's what you expect as your normal. If that's your normal, that's what you will recreate because you don't know any better.
Yeah.
So that's why education is so important, Ron. I sound like a broken record, I know, but even if a child's parents put their child or children in vulnerable situations by selling images or perhaps selling their children to perpetrators, and we know that happens.
Wow.
And it happens in Australia. We know that. If we have children who are educated, at least then they can hopefully have the words to speak, the network of support around them, who they go to if they need help, and the words to say, so they've got those skills so they can speak out and disclose.
Yeah, if I suppose once upon a time a child was seen and not heard, a child was, and I'll give you a prime example. I do remember a situation when I was going to school. I went to a Catholic school, and someone accused a priest, not in my parish, but another one that we heard about, of abusing them. That child got he got smacked black and blue. How dare you say that about Father such and such? And that child spoke up. So when we heard about that, there's no way in the world that we would ever then say anything if our priest did that, because we would get hit black and blue and not believed.
I think the good part about people speaking out about sexual abuse and family domestic violence is that it creates awareness around it. It creates awareness around the prevalence about it. It creates awareness about who's doing it, who's targeting children. It's less than 5% of children make up stories of child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Less than 5%. So we know now that if a child discloses abuse, we have to listen to them and we have to believe them.
Yeah.
And we have to let them know that they are believed.
Yes.
Which is so important also. And again, I'm running sessions around how to support a child who discloses abuse for educators at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's so important what you're doing, Ron. Like, you're prepared. I won't say happy, wrong choice of word, but you're prepared to have these discussions. And I'm really grateful that we can talk about this, because hopefully, if, for example, a single mum is listening to this and they might be on a dating app, hopefully it just makes them a little bit more aware of some of the things that can happen and what to look out for. In contrast, if you are someone who perhaps suspects their partner of viewing images, I would say to them that that behaviour doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
That is a red flag. It's one of those red flags we talked about before.
Yeah.
You need to see it as a red flag. That person needs support, urgent support. Covering it over or ignoring it won't make that problem go away.
Yeah.
It won't stop it. And another group too, if, for example, you are someone who is viewing child images, child sexual abuse images, this is not a passive activity. This actually has consequences of what you're doing. So children are actually being abused in those images.
Yeah.
They're being abused. So it's sexual abuse material and it's called as such. So whilst you think, oh, I'm just viewing images, it's not harming children in any way.
I suppose if I look at a photo, whatever that photo is, say it's a picture of a celebrity, and I'm seeing them smile, I'm thinking to myself, oh, they're happy. But we don't know what happened before that photo was taken. We don't know if that child was bashed, threatened, cut, harmed in any way. And then you're seeing whatever the image is. I don't know what the images are because I haven't seen any of these images, but maybe they're smiling in the picture or they're doing something very innocent, and you're thinking, well, there's no harm there. That child's happy.
Quite often partners of, and I'll say men, quite often partners of men who are viewing child sexual abuse material will discount what they're doing and try and legitimise it to themselves by saying to themselves, oh, it's just images. It's not actually abusing children in person. And again, we were talking about red flags earlier. This is a huge red flag. If you happen to come across your son, your adolescent son who's viewing these images, please don't shut that information out. If you come across that or you discover that they're sexually abusing a sibling, don't shut that information out. That information needs to be dealt with. You've seen that for a reason, and the reason is to act on it. Not just to tuck it away because it's going to cause a lot of discomfort for people around you.
So let me get this right. When you see that, this is not a one-off thing. It might be the first time they've ever done it, but it's not a one-off thing. It's going to continue. It's a pattern that's going to happen.
Yes. Yeah. And that is why we have the responses that we do in these surveys, because things aren't acted on. They're covered over. It is a heartbreaking thing to have to deal with. It is hugely emotive. It rips your heart open in ways that are indescribable. But at the end of the day, and I just repeat that, if you discover something like that, you have seen that for a reason.
Yeah.
And that's to act, not to push it aside, not to, put it under the carpet, but to actually act and do something.
Yeah, it's very a difficult conversation that we're having, but it has to be had. And this is why we do this, is because mainstream media don't want to report this sort of stuff. There's no money in it for them. There's no clickbait in it for them. But, the more we can get this out there and more people hear that these things are happening, the more they're prepared, the more that they are able to have a tool chest to prevent this from happening. Now, Karen, the target demographics, we've gone over this just before, the factors like the age, race, language, disability, social connections. It seems to be that it doesn't matter who you are. As you said, if you've got a vulnerability, you can be targeted. So if we look at these dating apps, whatever they are, whether they be some mainstream ones that get reported all the time, or they may be ones that, we're not so familiar with, such as Christian dating apps, such as maybe dating apps for phishing or something like that. These predators are targeting every sort of app that they can get their hands on that would have vulnerable people there that they can target. Is that correct? Essentially, yes. And as we spoke before, and I don't know whether we've brought this up so far in this podcast or not, but this is a successful strategy that child predators use. If it wasn't successful for them, they wouldn't do it. Yeah. And they wouldn't waste their time. So
the fact that we have these horrendous statistics, 1 in 8 that are being targeted, tells us that A, they're good at what they do.
Yeah.
B, there's vulnerability there and they're playing on it.
Yeah.
And C, these are highly manipulative, controlling individuals who are narcissistic and who have the ability to control the narrative.
Mm. And that's the thing, that if they can find a target and they know it's going to be successful and work, they're going to go for it.
Mm.
So a lot of parents are very largely unaware of the prevalence of predators' behaviours on dating apps. And it leads some to reconsider the information that they share, especially about their children.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to go onto a dating app and you're matching with people, what information should you not be giving out? And this is a hard one because this is, how long's a piece of string? You want to connect with someone, you want to share your life with them, but what things should we not be sharing until we meet in person, we find out more about this person, we find out maybe about their family and their past?
I think first and foremost, don't give away all your vulnerabilities because that's like handing a predator the roadmap of where they can enter.
So in the situation, in the first conversation, I'm a single mum. I've been out of work for 3 years. I don't know how I'm going to pay for my registration of my car next week. Those are sort of information that we really shouldn't be sharing right away.
I would suggest no. And again, we've got to consider, that whilst this is 1 in 8, there's 7 other people there that aren't targeting, so there are good people on dating apps. And I know, a couple of my neighbours, for example, are in really lovely relationships with partners that they've met online. So and it's a reasonable question, have you got kids? Because if you're, thinking about a future with this person, you may not want kids or you may want kids. So that's a reasonable question to ask. But as we talked about earlier on, it's about boundaries and about little by little. So you don't spill out all that information at once. Yeah. You take the time to get to know that person.
I think if someone asks you the question, for example, do you have kids? And you might say, yeah, I do. And then they start asking another question about your child. Maybe you can bring the conversation to something else, go to a new topic. But if they keep coming back to that, that's the flag, I think.
You got it. Absolutely.
So, I mean, if I was there and I might say, do you have children? Yes, I do. Okay, great. So what sort of movies do you like? Would be probably my next question. Or what food do you like? Or where do you like to go and where would be your dream holiday destination? Yeah. But if I said, for example, you got children, great. What ages are they? Oh, they're 5 and 6. Oh, great. And she says something along the line, say, so what do you do for work? Oh, I work in construction. So tell me, what type of toys do your children like, for example? I mean, I don't know this thing because I'm not doing this, but these are the sort of things, if you're trying to turn the conversation around from something, a vulnerability, and they keep coming back to it, this is where you might need to end the conversation.
Like you say, it's a flag, it's a red flag. So if the conversation is steered back around to you and specifically your kids, where do they go to the school? Oh, do you have far to drive to drop them off in the mornings? It's never blatantly obvious, although in this case, from the research findings, clearly it is. They are that blatant in what they're after. Yeah. And people are responding and giving them what they want, sadly. But, to have boundaries around your children, these are precious little individuals that, they need all that nurture and care. They need protecting. They need your love and support.
So, Karen, also, for example, when you're putting a picture up of yourself on these dating apps, my suggestion, and you're the expert, don't put your kids in that photo.
Probably not a real good idea. And because I shouldn't joke, Ron, no. and I'm not joking. But again, we have to, as fearful as some of these statistics are, at the end of the day, we can't allow fear to rule our world.
No, but we've got to make sure that we have those protections in place.
Yep. We've got to have firm boundaries around ourselves and especially around our kids, because we know kids are being targeted. So,
I mean, I'm looking at it this way, is if you're a child predator looking for a victim, a target, and you flicking through these things and you see a woman with her children, that's perfect opportunity to say, well, I'm not going to waste my time with those 6 others that have no children in their photo, but this one does. So
Going to save them some time, isn't it?
yeah, it is. And that's the thing. And we're not victim blaming here, but you're putting yourself there to be their target, for them to target you, where you can make it more difficult for them to, and of course, waste their time. And hopefully that means that they won't be able to get that information, that material, or abuse a child because it's taking longer. Because let's face it, we don't know who these people are. We don't know where they're coming from. They're anonymous online. So, we can't send out the police to their house and arrest them straight away because we just don't know where they are. But if we make it more difficult, it means it's going to maybe save one child.
And again, there's a number of good points that you've raised there, Ron, but I think too, something that really is very important to mention is if you are on a dating app and you are or sense that you're being targeted, to inform that dating app. And there's mechanisms to do that. Let them know, take photos of the conversation.
Screenshot the conversation. That's a good one.
Screenshot the conversation it's better to err on the side of caution.
Yeah. Now, Karen, this is going to be a very difficult question, and a very difficult question for people to hear. If someone has been targeted and they have sent images and they're at a point now where they don't know what to do, they don't want to go ahead sending any more, they know, I shouldn't have done this and all. What advice can you give them to do?
I think first and foremost, you need to seek professional help. There are organisations, and we can certainly list them online, Ron.
We'll put them in the show notes, and we'll have something after our conversation today.
Seek help straight away. The longer you leave it, the longer you procrastinate or be frozen. And again, freezing is a trauma response.
Yeah.
So this might be your own personal trauma coming to the front. I'm frozen stiff. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to act. I feel cornered. I feel pressured. But the important thing to do is to seek help straight away.
Yeah.
Don't allow this to continue on any longer than it has to.
I think it's a very serious but very sad situation if someone is in this. But if you do realise that this has happened, you've sent some pictures, you can stop. You can stop right now. You don't have to continue on. If you've never met this person, you can stop. I mean, do you block them? Do you report them? What do you do in that situation? You decided, I'm going to stop. I'll go and get help, or I'm going to do something, but I need to stop right now. Should they, if they're online and never met this person, should they just block them? Should they do as you said, take screenshots and then go and see someone?
It's hard to generalise.
Yeah.
Because,
every situation is going to be different.
It's going to be different. But if it's happening online, I would take screenshots of the conversation and then I would notify the dating app. And let them know exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
And then depending on what they tell you to do, because there are mechanisms in place now legally that they have to follow. If you're not entirely satisfied with the advice that you get from the dating app, see a professional.
Now, I have to check this up, but there's either a cyber ombudsman or there is something that's around these dating apps where you can report that as well. So we will find that and put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, there is. And just getting away from dating apps, like, for example, teenagers get caught up in this really, really common thing for teenagers with, partners asking for, naked images and then sharing those images, and then the girls thinking, oh, what have I done?
Yeah.
And then those images being shared widely. So, this is a huge, huge issue.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot to get this under control, to do something about this. Unfortunately, don't think will ever go away, but I think we can have enough mechanisms in place, enough safeguards that, especially with AI now, that can identify these things that, maybe it might be something in the app where keywords come up and a little pop-up box comes up and says, we just want to check to make sure you're all right. We've seen in the conversation that you've been asked to share a photo. Are you happy with this? Something that maybe gets them to think twice, maybe what's needed, but I think we'll get there in the sense of being able to put safeguards around. I mean, you're the expert, Karen. We'll never, ever completely stamp this out, but I think that we're able to put something in place that will really make people think. And as you said, if this wasn't working, they wouldn't be doing it.
No, absolutely not. And again, I think I touched on it earlier, but, one of the fastest growing groups of child predators are adolescents. So education in schools is a must.
Yeah.
Education at home is a must.
And I think also, as you said before, to believe the child, not to dismiss them, sit them down and say, look, tell me what's happened. Let's go through it. And then do a proper investigation, whether you do it yourself to start with. And then you start to say, hey, yeah, I did remember this happening. Or, yeah, it's funny that every time my daughter has a bath, my son wants to go in there and brush his teeth or something. These are things that once they've been brought up, these are things you need to investigate.
And again, if children are taught protective, body safe education, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
So if a child is being touched inappropriately, that child has the skills and the language to speak up. They know who to go to tell, and importantly, to keep telling until it stops.
Yeah, I think you've really hit it on the nail on the head there. That is that these predators live on silence. If the child is silent, it doesn't speak up. But if every child speaks up and says it, they're going to get to a point where, they're going to say, well, I can't do anything because as soon as I say something or do something, the child goes straight away and reports me. So I think that's the way we got to, unfortunately, the education towards the perpetrators or the people doing this, it's just not going to work. We need to start with the kids and really drum it into the children that if someone touches you inappropriately, someone shows you something inappropriately, someone suggests something inappropriately, you got to tell someone, because then these people will understand that it doesn't matter what I do, every child's going to tell. So, unfortunately, every child's not going to tell, but, if we look at it that way, every child's going to tell, they're out of business.
Education is important.
Yeah, and we've got to start with the children. Yep. And we really got to put it in, whether it's a conversation you want to have or not. And I remember you saying in one of our podcast episodes, don't nickname private parts. We've got to say what they are. Don't use words or child's-like language when it comes to sexuality. Because at the end of the day, when a child says something like my pee-pee or something like that, we might think it's fun and games. But when they came out and they actually say the correct term, I think we think a bit more.
Absolutely. And when I consider, as an educator myself, when I consider busy classrooms,
yeah,
and if a child does disclose using incorrect language, that disclosure may be ignored because the teacher simply hasn't got time. They're trying, they've got their eye on 6 other things at once. So the correct terminology of the private parts of the body is really important.
In conclusion, we've had a really great conversation. What are the key takeaways that you want people to know from today's conversation, Karen?
Oh, my goodness, there's so many. First and foremost, education for kids is hugely important, irrespective of their age. So, I would dearly love to see comprehensive education delivered in all schools.
Yeah.
Independent schools, Catholic schools, public schools from, early on, kindy, right through up to when they leave school, year 11, year 12.
I think going through their phases of their childhood from infant, toddler to preteen to teen to adult, they're going to experience different sexualization. They're going to experience different abuse maybe. And if those at the right time are brought in, it means that they will always have that power to report or know the flags that are coming up.
Yeah, it needs to be age appropriate.
Yeah.
And we
situation appropriate. I mean, a 5-year-old is not going to go to a party and drink where a teenager will. So therefore it's a different situation that they need to be aware of or what could happen.
Yeah. And I remember we talked about age appropriate education a little while ago when we discussed that book by Yumi Steins. And
yes,
whilst it had great content, it was certainly not age appropriate. They were covering a large range of ages in one book. So, education for children is so important. If you are on a dating app, boundaries, little by little, get to know the person over time. They need to prove their trustworthiness. Don't, don't be an open slate and spill out your whole life story and all your vulnerabilities because you're giving them information. So be careful about that. If, for example, you are with someone and you suspect or you have discovered or caught your partner viewing images that are inappropriate, seek help straight away. Act on that information.
Now, just so people know, seek help straight away from whom? Where do we go?
A professional. So a counsellor, a psychologist, general practitioner, certainly. They can forward you to appropriate places. But the important thing is seek help, because as we talked about, this is an addiction, highly addictive behaviour, and that person needs help. And by covering this over or pretending it didn't happen or dismissing it, thinking, they're not really abusing children. Well, yes, they are. And the behaviour won't go away. It will escalate. But it won't go away. If you're a person who is starting to view images or have been viewing images, please seek some help. This can be stopped. It's not impossible. It can stop, but you need to get some help. So I guess, there are 4 or 5 things.
Fantastic. Look, it has been a great conversation, and we're definitely going to have you back again to talk about other issues that come up. So, look, Karen, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and shedding light on this crucial issue. And as we wrap up our conversation, it's clear that while dating apps have made strides in enhancing safety features, there's still a lot of work to be done. The responsibility lies not only with the app developers, but also with the users in raising awareness and preventing potential risk and fostering a safer digital environment. Look, we really appreciate your insights today, and we look forward to continuing discussing these type of topics, these hard topics that we need to get out there to everyone on Podcast City Radio. So, Karen Keevy, can you let people know how they can contact you or where they can go to get more information about you?
Sure. Across all social media platforms, so Instagram and Facebook, my own little page for educators is called Empowered Me. It's all about empowering children with the language and the skills, and it's about embracing our bodies, so it's very body positive. So, those two platforms and my website as well. And I'm on LinkedIn. So there's a number of ways.
Fantastic. And we'll have all those details, of course, in the show notes after this goes to podcast. So, Karen Keevy, thank you so much for joining us.
It has been a pleasure. Talking about this stuff is always difficult. But I think, as we said, Ron, the more we discuss this, the more we get it out into the open, the more we take away its power.
Most definitely. Thank you for joining us on this very special episode. I'm Ron Fiedler. Until next time, bye for now.